Hello, welcome to the YouTube channel of Christ United Methodist Church, located in the Owen Brown Interfaith Center here in Columbia, Maryland. My name is Reverend Angela Wells. My pronouns are she and her, and it's my absolute joy to serve as the pastor here at Christ UMC. Whoever you are and whatever your story, we are so grateful that you have found your way here to our YouTube channel today, and we look forward to connecting with you further. Christ UMC is a reconciling congregation, which means that we as a church have committed to the full inclusion of LGBTQ+ persons in the life and ministry of the church. We have also pledged to become an anti-racist church. Both of these commitments are a part of our identity as followers of Jesus Christ, striving to love God and neighbor in all we do. At CUMC, we celebrate Christian love that encompasses absolutely all people.
The scripture lesson this morning is from Acts 2:42-47. They devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching and fellowship, to the breaking of bread and the prayers. All came upon everyone because many wonders and signs were being done through the apostles. All who believed were together and had all things in common. They would sell their possessions and goods and distribute the proceeds to all as any had need. Day by day, as they spent much time together in the temple, they broke bread at home and ate their food with glad and generous hearts, praising God and having the goodwill of all the people. And day by day, the Lord added to their number those who were being saved. The word of the Lord.
My mom loves to tell about a stage I went through when I was about 4 years old. During this stage, when she asked me for a hug, I would tell her, "Sorry, I'm all out. I have to go to the bank to get some more. Try again later." I was a precocious child. It's okay, my own children are giving me a taste of my own medicine. At 4 years old, where did I get the concept that one could run out of hugs? Run out of affection, of love, that it needed to be carefully dispersed, hoarded, safeguarded? Of course, to me, it was a fun game to taunt my mother with waiting for a hug. But looking back on it, there's something a bit unnerving about how I had absorbed such ideas at such a young age. I certainly did not lack for love in my family, but I was catching on to how society works. You pay for things. There aren't always enough things. And I wanted the things. I needed the things. That's what the commercials told me, and I believed them. Now, while we might not be as gullible as we were as kids to commercials, we still absorb this consumerist messaging deeply within our worldview, whether we want to or not. We come to think of life transactionally. We give to get. But can it ever be a gift if it's a transaction? If there's strings attached, if there's an expectation of reciprocity? We learn to worry about owing people things. We seek equality not always out of a sense of justice, but out of a sense of seeking to not be beholden to anyone. Anyone else keep some generic gifts around the house, especially around Christmas, just in case someone gives you a gift that you weren't expecting? I'm not the only one. We feel bad if a friend gives us a Christmas gift when we didn't get them anything. We feel bad if a neighbor keeps inviting us over for dinner and we haven't had the chance to reciprocate. We learn to attribute power to the act of giving, power to determine who is deserving, power to control how the gift is used. We catch ourselves wondering how that person panhandling on the side of the road is going to use that money. We get stuck in a scarcity mentality. What if there's not enough? How do we protect ourselves and our families? We learn to think of giving as an optional act of charity rather than as a way of life, a part of our identity as disciples of Jesus Christ, God's pure gift. Today's text from Acts chapter 2 offers a radically different economic mindset. Now, few scriptures manage to make progressive and conservative Christians equally uncomfortable, but this one might just take the cake. That's because it doesn't challenge our politics, it challenges our economics. And while we might be very politically divided as a nation right now, capitalism still reigns supreme across the political divide. So then we come and we read this economic snapshot of the early Christian community. It says, all who believed were together and had all things in common. They would sell their possessions and goods and distribute the proceeds to all as any had need. What are we supposed to do with that? Some avoid these seemingly socialist verses altogether, choosing instead to focus on how they were united as a community. That's a more palatable topic. Others lift up this radical economic practice as nothing more than an ideal that won't be replicated till kingdom come. Still others try to lower the bar. See, the early Christians gave everything they had. Surely you can give a little more in the offering plate. It's not like we're asking for everything. But in all three of these approaches, we're avoiding, dismissing, or minimizing a pretty compelling picture of what early Christian community looked like. This text is not just about unity as some bland, lowest common denominator concept. This text is not just an ideal that we can dismiss as unrealistic. And I hate to break it to you on the finance committee, but this text is not just about what we give to the church in the offering plate. This text is about how we live and move and have our being. This text is about how we relate to money and things, but even more so how we relate to one another. This text is about a radically different ethic, economy, and culture than anything we're familiar with. And when it comes down to it, whether it's descriptive or prescriptive, whether it's historic or idealistic, it's here, it's in our Bibles. Luke found it important enough to include in this summary of what the early church looked like. So maybe we should pay attention. If you notice, the text doesn't start with the sharing of all things in common. What was the first verse that Karen read? They devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching and fellowship, to the breaking of bread and the prayers. It's easy enough to skip over that verse and focus on the wonders and signs or the radical economics or the Lord adding to their number each and every day. But the text starts with describing the early church's priorities. They devoted themselves. Devotion is more than just a to-do list. Devotion is more than just routine. Devotion entails intentionality and wholehearted commitment. These are the priorities that are shaping the early church's lives, individually and as a community. Teaching, fellowship, breaking of bread, prayers. It's a decidedly communal life. Too often today, people think of Christianity as an individual's profession of certain doctrine, what they believe internally. Meanwhile, the Bible, we have a description of what it means to be a Christian, and it's all about how we live together externally. So let's take these four things one at a time. First, teaching, how we learn and grow together. Now, much to some folks' dismay, there's no specificity to this claim, just as the apostles' teaching. Is that the Gospels? Is that oral tradition? Is that some lost document that spells out the necessities of faith? Church historians could argue about this all day, but this is all we're given, just says the apostles' teaching. Others may like to at least specify which translation of the Bible. Surely Luke, the author of Acts, was referring to the good King James Bible. Never mind that English didn't even exist yet. Some would like to make the claim that it refers to a specific creed or a specific denominational stance. But alas, all we're given is the apostles' teaching. And maybe that's for the better. There's some wisdom in this lack of specificity. For it doesn't say we are to master the apostles' teaching or to deconstruct the apostles' teaching or to use it to argue with one another. It says the believers devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching. Devotion involves commitment, giving yourself over to something larger than yourself. Devotion implies intentionality, not just speed reading or reading for comprehension, rather soaking in the teaching. Devotion implies taking the time and space for both breadth and depth. To devote oneself to the apostles' teaching is a life choice, something that requires your time and talent, your gifts and graces, your relationships and priorities. And it's a fundamentally communal activity. In the first century, not everyone could read and not everyone had access to scrolls. You had to come together in community to learn and to grow. So second, fellowship. How we gather in community and develop quality relationships while continuing to invite new folks in. This devotion to community is a countercultural move in our individualistic society. Believers are devoted not just to this perfect Jesus, but to his decidedly less than perfect friends. We know God in and through and amidst our community of faith. And while that community stretches the globe in the universal church of Jesus, there is something about being in a particular community. When I studied abroad in Mexico, I regularly attended a Mexican Methodist church, but I also occasionally attended Roman Catholic Mass with my host family. I really enjoyed attending Mass, but there was one thing that bothered me about my experience of Mass in Mexico. And it had nothing to do with theology or tradition. It had to do with community, or lack thereof. In a 90% Catholic country with an estimated 11,000 Catholic churches, with a church on every corner, it seems, the practice of most Mexican Catholics is to simply attend Mass at whatever church they happen to be walking by at the right time. In a country where it's taken for granted that everyone is Catholic, believe me, I got funny looks when I said that I was Protestant. There's no perceived need for a specific community of believers. Now, as someone who was raised in a small Methodist church where everyone knew everyone else and where I had more adopted grandparents than I could count, I couldn't fathom worshiping with different people every week, having no family of Christ as such. We need one another. We need one another to love and support in difficult times. We need one another to hold us accountable to what we say we believe. We need one another to unite the gifts God has given me with the gifts God has given you, for both of us to more fully come to know Christ in our midst. That brings us to the third, the breaking of bread. How we share not just in the ritual of Holy Communion, but in the daily practice of eating meals together. This one must be important because it's mentioned twice over, sharing meals and eating in one another's homes. Now, there are plenty of jokes out there about Methodist potlucks, and God knows we like to eat at CUMC. But it's not just about the food. It's about the community that is formed around the table. We hear studies and read blogs lamenting that families more and more are not making the time to eat together. So even in the secular world, we recognize that more happens around the table than just the intake of calories and nutrients. Around the table, we enjoy one another's company, check in with one another in a more thorough way than what happens when just passing one another in the hallway. Conversation around a table has time to meander into topics that would never come up otherwise. When was the last time you invited someone who you don't know very well to lunch or coffee after church? Not just the scheduled times of First Friday and lunch bunch, as great as those are, But there's something more intentional about a specific invitation, one-on-one, taking the time to invest in a new relationship. It's not just a meal. It's not just a nice extra thing to do. It's a fundamental part of who we are as disciples of Jesus Christ. And lastly, fourth, prayers. How we lift our prayers to God together. Prayers is plural. They were devoted to the prayers, is what it says. There are many ways to pray. There are many times to pray. This devotion reflects more than just your traditional mealtime and bedtime prayers. Devotion implies energy and intentionality to pray without ceasing, as Paul writes. How is it that we are cultivating lives that are saturated with prayer? Lives with time set apart for prayer, but also lives that are porous enough to allow that communion with the divine to break through our everyday tasks and interactions. These are the four markers of the Christian life: devotion to the apostles' teaching, to the community, to shared meals, and to prayers. The rest of the reading describes the consequences of that devotion, the wonders and signs, the holding all things in common, the Lord adding to their number. Those are the effects of devoting ourselves to teaching, fellowship, bread, and prayers. Too often the church tries to put the cart before the horse. We think the goal is to grow the church, when the goal is really to grow ourselves into such a community that lives in such a radically different existence that people are drawn into relationship, into community. The church didn't decide to share all things in common. The early church did not legislate that they had to share all things in common. The early church came to share all things in common as a natural outgrowth of their devotion to teaching, fellowship, breaking of bread, and prayers. This snapshot of radical kingdom economics isn't just pie in the sky imaginative exercise. This image is what Jesus was trying to tell us all along. It's what abundant life looks like. This is a glimmer of what living as an Easter people looks like. This is a glimpse of the kingdom that has yet to fully come, but is already breaking in through fits and starts into our everyday lives if we let it. Day by day, as they spent much time together in the temple, they broke bread at home and ate their food with glad and generous hearts, praising God and having the goodwill of all people. And day by day, the Lord added to their number those who were being saved. The joy of the early Christian community is genuine, embodied, and contagious. This is the aftermath of Easter. This is the aftermath of resurrection. Changed communities, changed ethics, changed economics, changed priorities, changed lives. Going full in on that abundant life Christ came to give all of us. Living in such a way as to make that abundant life accessible to all of God's beloved. Not because we have to, or because we're supposed to.
Thank you so much for tuning in. If you are new to CUMC, whether you are local or tuning in from far away, we would love to connect with you. Please feel free to visit our website at www.cumcobic.org. Visit us on Facebook or connect with me, Reverend Angela, directly at angelawells153@gmail.com. As you move into whatever is next in your day, I invite you to receive this blessing. Beloved, you are made in God's own image. You are enough. You are not alone. Go forth with the blessing of God, the Creator, Redeemer, and Sustainer, to share the light and love of Christ in your community and far beyond.